Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Blythe Sewing Basics. This is video number 2 in a series. In this video I'm going to talk about fabric and threads. So just a reminder, this series is for beginners. If you have never sewn before or you have very little sewing experience, then you are my target audience. However, if you do know how to sew, feel free to watch and give your own tips and suggestions down below in the comments. I'm always open for ideas. All right, so let's get to it. Threads and fabric, all right? Again, this is for beginners, and for beginners, I recommend, as far as fabric goes, that you start with cotton, okay? Cotton is one of the easiest things to sew with. It's pretty easy to find, and in particular, I suggest quilting cotton, okay? These pieces here that I'm showing you are called fat quarters, okay? And a fat quarter is basically a quarter of a yard cut as a square. And you can find a lot of fat quarters at places like big box stores like Walmart. You can purchase them on Amazon. I will give you a list of sources actually at the end of this video. So they're fairly easy to find even if you don't have a quilting store near you. And there's a few reasons why I really like fat quarters and quilting cotton in particular to sew for dolls. First of all, as you can see from some of my samples here, you can easily find small print, and that's pretty important when you think about the scale of your Blythe doll. For example, I have Ebony here, and you can see she's pretty small, so this type of scale works pretty well for her, okay? And the thing is with quilting cotton, often they have pretty small prints because if you think about it, they're cutting out little squares and then stitching them together. Another thing I like about quilting cotton is that it tends to be pretty decent quality as far as thread count. It tends to be a higher thread count, and a fat quarter can range in price anywhere from $1, especially if you can get them on sale. I've even gotten them as low as 80 cents, which is, yeah. So anywhere from about $1 up to $5 for a typical fat quarter. Obviously, your mileage may vary, and I'm talking about US dollars, by the way. One thing I would suggest for beginners to avoid, and again, I'm talking about beginners, it's not like you can't use any fabric. For the most part, there's really nothing you can't use as far as fabric goes when it comes to sewing for your dolls. But for noobs, I recommend that you avoid something called knit or cotton knit because it tends to be very stretchy. This is an adorable little top that Alexandra at Creative 404 made for me. She's a very experienced seamstress, so something like this would be easy for her to make and work with. But it's stretchy, okay? And here's another little t-shirt. I got this off of a vendor on AliExpress, and it's also, you can see it's kind of stretchy. And when you're sewing, this can be difficult to kind of work with when you're a beginner. You can sometimes overstretch it when you're stitching on it. So just to get started, I would say avoid this type of fabric. I'm not saying always avoid it. Once you've started sewing a little bit, go at it. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. I will be in this series mainly talking about using something like this, a fat quarter type of cotton fabric. In fact, don't forget, you might even have some cotton fabric in your closet. If you're totally new and you have no fabric stash whatsoever, then definitely look in your closet and consider if there's any old shirts in there that maybe need to be transposed into little doll clothes. Next type of fabric I recommend getting is some muslin, okay? This is some muslin I purchased online. Again, I'll give you some resources at the end of this video, but what I like with muslin, again, it's useful if you want to do some practice, and it's pretty inexpensive usually to purchase some, but also I like to line some of my doll clothes with muslin. If you can't specifically find muslin, you can just go ahead and get a piece of white fabric that's also usually available as a fat quarter as well. White cotton fabric also works really well. So just to give you an example of how muslin or some white cotton fabric would work in a doll dress, for example, here's one that I have already made, and the top of it is lined. This is useful because that way it kind of cuts down on the possibility of staining, and it also just makes a nice finished look to your little doll dress. So another important point to look for when you're picking out your fabric is scale. All right, obviously the Blythe dolls are pretty small, so something like this might be a little so-so as far as being able to use for a doll, okay? You can see those little bicycles on there. And in fact, here's another one that's a little, well, not a little, but a lot so-so. This is really kind of too big to use on a doll. But I could use it as part of a skirt maybe for her if it was a long skirt, or maybe one piece like this could work as a dress. But you can see it starts getting problematic when your pattern starts getting bigger. Something really small like this works great for a doll. So again, if you're a beginner, look for quilting cotton. Try to get a fat quarter because you don't need a lot, and look for a print that's like this, very small. Additionally, when you're looking at prints, notice how this print is all over the place. There's no spacing in between. It's kind of no rhyme or reason, okay? Whereas something like this, notice how the flamingos line up. There's also a top and bottom to this flamingo. So if I were to use this and I accidentally had my pattern piece upside down on here and then I cut it out, my dress would have upside down flamingos. Okay, so as a beginner, try to avoid something like this that has a top and a bottom, and that basically has, if you see, they're lined up, because then you have to be extra careful when you go to cut out your pattern piece. If you have something like this, you don't have to worry so much about it. If you have something like, here's another example. The butterflies are all over the place, okay? So real easy to cut stuff out. Here's another example of something to avoid. Again, as a beginner, obviously you have lines here, so you would have to be careful about where things are going to match up when you're actually sewing and putting pieces together. Not that it's not possible to do, it's not impossible at all. Just as a beginner, you know, pick something easy, pick something like this. All right, a little less glamorous, but let's talk about threads, okay? Yeah, I have a lot of threads. I have even more than this, but maybe I might have a problem. I don't know. I really like to be able to match up the thread color whenever possible. However, as a beginner, you don't need all these different color threads, honestly. You need some neutral colored thread, like something like this would work, or white would work. Obviously, black is neutral, but I would not recommend starting with sewing on black fabric. It's difficult to see what you're doing with black fabric, and of course it can stain the doll, so you know you got to be careful with that. So I would again recommend sort of neutral creams, whites, this kind of thing, okay? Now, as far as what type of thread to use, again, I really like cotton fabric, and so then I like to use cotton thread. However, if you head off to some place like Walmart, more than likely you're going to find something like this, which is a all-purpose thread. It says all-purpose on it, if you can see that or not. So it's an all-purpose thread, and this one actually is made out of polyester. I still use this. I have it. It's, you know, easy to use. You can use it with cotton. Get something that's easy for you to find initially, and just get like a couple of spools. You don't have to get a ton. So something like this. Another one that you can often find is, it's a mercerized kind, and it's cotton covered polyester. Again, this is often something you're going to find. This is Coats & Clark, and that's a brand that typically you're going to find at a lot of craft stores, big box stores, Amazon, that kind of thing. So yeah, so you just get some neutral colored thread, a couple of, you know, honestly, I would just get one thing of neutral colored thread, all purpose, get you started. Get yourself a couple of fat quarters that have patterns all over them, and maybe a fat quarter piece of white cotton fabric, and you'll be ready to roll pretty soon. Of course, I do plan to have you guys sew as I work on this series, so stay tuned for more instruction on that. All right, so where can you get sewing supplies these days? Unfortunately, there are not tons of sewing stores around like there used to be when I was growing up. It's really sad, especially where I live. I am very limited. However, there's lots of places online, and there are still some physical stores you can go and find supplies. And in fact, of course, my experience happens to be in the US, so this is where I would like my viewers, especially international viewers, if you know of any particular places that you could recommend, any vendors or any stores online or in person, physical stores, please feel free to put them in the comments below. I would not put any links because I have links blocked on my comments because of nefarious people who like to put stuff in there that I don't appreciate. So I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so my personal favorites are, I have quite a list. All right, so obviously Amazon is a place that you can purchase fabric at. And in fact, the next place that I recommend, fabric.com, not only can you go to fabric.com, but fabric.com also sells on Amazon. So that's pretty handy. Of course, Walmart. And another place I like is called Connecting Threads. I have gotten fabric and also threads from them. I believe Connecting Threads is actually part of a company called Knit Picks where that sells yarn. So that is a US-based company. Joann's, they also have an online store, and some places have physical stores. They're a bit of a drive for me if I were to use them. Another place to check out is AliExpress. Personally, I have not purchased a lot of sewing supplies from them. However, I know of people like J Dolls UK who has, and she has shown some really cute stuff that she's purchased from them as far as fabric and notions. So that's something else to consider. And finally, obviously Etsy and eBay, and those are international possibly for some people. I have purchased sewing items on both of those platforms. Very often, there's quite a few Etsy sellers that sell fat quarter bundles or even like scrap bundles and that kind of thing. So I have gotten some pretty decent deals on Etsy before for small pattern pieces. It's a little tricky because you can't physically see them, but sometimes they'll have like a ruler there so you can sort of have an idea of how small the pattern is. And that's something you kind of have to think of when you get your fabric. All right, so wrapping it up real quick. Quilting cotton fabric, small print. Watch the orientation, try to get a pattern on the fabric that's all a print that's kind of all over the place. As far as sewing goes and thread, get something neutral, white or cream or something like that, and either get all-purpose, which is probably going to be the easiest to find, or get some cotton thread to go with your cotton fabric. If you would like to continue to learn more about how to sew for your Blythe dolls, make sure you check out my playlist. It's called Blythe Sewing Basics, and I will continue to be posting regular videos in this series. If you have anything in particular that you want, please make sure you add it to the comments. Let me know if there's anything specific you would like me to cover. I have a big old long list. But pretty soon I want to get sewing with you guys. So I have like one more after this, and I'm going to cover some more basics, and then we're going to get into sewing. So I'm hoping that episode 4, I will actually have you guys sewing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for stopping by. Please share this with anybody you know that might be interested. Give this a thumbs up, and have a wonderful Dolly Day. Bye-bye.